People often assume that love looks like constant affection, endless communication, validation, words of reassurance. But for someone who's emotionally avoidant, love doesn't look like that. It's quieter, more fragile, and far more revealing when it finally appears. When an avoidant does this one thing, you've reached a part of them that most never will, and that means you've broken through the fortress they built around their soul. What most people misunderstand about avoidant individuals is that their detachment isn't a reflection of apathy, it's a reflection of fear. It's easy to take their emotional distance personally, to assume that if someone withdraws, it must mean they don't care. But that's not what's happening beneath the surface. Avoidant behavior is a survival strategy, one constructed early in life, when closeness was unsafe or unpredictable. Somewhere along the line, this person learned that intimacy led to pain, that vulnerability invited control, or that dependence made them weak. So they made an unconscious pact with themselves, and never again will I let anyone have that kind of power over me. Never again will I need someone so badly that I lose myself in the process. What you're seeing then is not emotional coldness, it's armor. It's a defensive wall built from years of disappointment, neglect, or chaos. And it's important to realize that this armor didn't appear out of nowhere, it was crafted out of necessity. When a child grows up in an environment where emotional needs are ignored or punished, they internalize the belief that love equals pain. So they begin to equate independence with safety, detachment with control, and emotional distance with strength. By the time they become adults, that belief system is fully integrated into their identity. They don't just act distant, they believe distance is the only way to survive. That's why when someone comes along who genuinely cares, the avoidant doesn't know how to respond. Their instincts clash with their desires. They may want connection, but every fiber of their nervous system screams that it's a trap. Their mind whispers, if you get close, you'll lose yourself again. Don't make that mistake. So they withdraw, not because they don't value you, but because they're terrified of what closeness demands. Emotional intimacy feels like surrender, and to someone who's built their life around control, surrender feels like annihilation. Now, here's the difficult truth. You cannot force an avoidant to lower their defenses. The more you chase, demand, or pressure them to open up, the more they'll retreat. Not because they want to hurt you, but because pressure activates the very wounds that shape their avoidance. To them, your insistence feels like invasion. It mirrors the loss of autonomy they once experienced, and that triggers panic. What they need instead is space. Space to feel safe enough to choose connection on their own terms. This doesn't mean you excuse neglect or emotional unavailability. It means you understand the why behind their behavior before reacting to the what tray. When you stop taking their distance personally, you stop adding fuel to the cycle of fear and withdrawal. You begin to see that underneath the armor is someone who still longs to be seen, to be accepted without judgment, to be loved without conditions. But for them, love isn't something that flows freely. It's something they have to relearn, one cautious step at a time. And when you can view their detachment not as rejection but as fear, everything changes. You start to recognize the small cracks in their armor, the subtle gestures, the quiet check-ins, the moments of honesty that might seem insignificant but actually mean everything. Those are signs of courage, because for an avoidant, expressing care isn't easy, it's terrifying. But every time they do, it's an act of rebellion against their own history. It's proof that fear doesn't have the final word. So, if you truly want to understand an avoidant, remember this: they're not running from you. They're running from a past that taught them love is dangerous. And the moment you see that clearly, you stop trying to tear down their walls and instead start creating a space where those walls no longer feel necessary. That's when healing begins. When an avoidant person opens up even slightly, you're witnessing something extraordinarily rare, a moment of profound trust. To understand its depth, you have to realize that vulnerability for an avoidant isn't natural, it's threatening. It feels like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there's solid ground beneath. Most of their lives they've survived by staying in control, by keeping their emotions private, their fears hidden, and their hearts guarded. To reveal those parts is to expose the very core of what they've spent years protecting. So when they finally do it, even in small ways, you have to see it for what it truly is, an act of courage disguised as hesitation. Avoidants learned early that vulnerability was dangerous. Maybe when they reached out for comfort, it wasn't there. Maybe their feelings were dismissed, mocked, or used against them, so they built an inner rule: don't need anyone. And this rule became the foundation of their emotional world. Independence became their shield, and self-sufficiency became their identity. To depend on someone felt like surrendering control, and control was the only thing keeping them safe. So when they find themselves in a relationship where connection is required, where emotional exposure is part of love, it creates a storm inside them. Their heart wants to open, but their mind warns them of the cost. When they finally let you see that storm, when they talk about their past, their fears, or their insecurities, it's not a random act, it's the emotional equivalent of unlocking a door they've kept sealed for years. You're not just someone they like, you've become someone they trust not to use their vulnerability against them. That trust is sacred. For most people, opening up is natural, but for an avoidant, it's an act that defies their conditioning. It's like learning to breathe underwater. It goes against everything they've been taught about survival. That's why your response in that moment matters so much. If you meet their vulnerability with criticism, impatience, or emotional intensity, you reinforce their old narrative that closeness leads to pain. But if you meet it with empathy, calm, and acceptance, you give them an entirely new experience. You show them that vulnerability doesn't have to end in hurt. It can lead to connection, and that single experience can start rewriting their internal story about what love means. Understand that for avoidance, vulnerability isn't just about revealing emotions. It's about surrendering control. And for someone whose safety has always depended on control, that surrender feels like exposure to danger. That's why it often comes in fragments. They might share one small detail, test your response, and retreat again. They might say something self-deprecating instead of directly admitting fear. They might express affection through actions rather than words. These subtle behaviors are their way of saying, I'm trying, but I'm scared. And you have to recognize that trying for them is monumental. What you're witnessing when they become vulnerable is the beginning of healing. It's the first step out of isolation and into trust. It's the quiet rebellion of a soul choosing connection over safety, even though everything inside screams otherwise. And the most powerful thing you can do is hold that space without demanding more than they can give. Because when they see that their vulnerability doesn't lead to rejection, shame, or loss of control, they start to believe that love can coexist with safety. In the end, when an avoidant opens up, it's not about the words they say. It's about what those words represent. It means you've reached the part of them that still believes in connection, however fragile that belief might be. It means you've become someone who has earned their trust, not through force, but through understanding. And once that trust is given, it becomes the foundation for a new kind of relationship, one built not on fear, but on the slow, steady rediscovery of what it means to feel safe enough to be seen. Safety is the foundation of love for an avoidant person. Without it, no amount of affection, reassurance, or persistence can reach them. Safety, for them, doesn't mean comfort in the traditional sense. It means the absence of threat, emotional chaos, and unpredictability. You have to understand that avoidants have lived in a world where love and danger were often intertwined. Maybe they grew up with caregivers who were inconsistent, warm one moment, cold the next. Maybe expressing emotion led to conflict or rejection. Over time, they learned that it was safer to rely on themselves, to keep their inner world private, and to treat connection as something potentially harmful. So when they enter a relationship, the question at the back of their mind isn't, do I love this person? It's, am I safe here? That question shapes everything. When they feel unsafe, when they sense pressure, judgment, or emotional volatility, they withdraw. It's instinctive, like a reflex. They're not trying to punish you or manipulate you. They're trying to survive. They need to know that their autonomy won't be taken away, that they won't be emotionally smothered or trapped. This is why avoidants often pull away the moment things start to feel too close. To them, closeness without safety feels like a cage. But when they sense calmness, consistency, and acceptance from you, something remarkable happens. They start to relax. They start to trust that they can exist in the relationship without losing themselves. This is why patience and emotional steadiness matter more than intensity. When you respond to their distance with panic, accusations, or demands, it reinforces their deepest fear. That intimacy will cost them their freedom. But when you respond with groundedness, you communicate something entirely different. You show them that connection doesn't have to be controlling, that love doesn't require surrendering one's individuality. That's when safety begins to take root, and only when safety exists can genuine intimacy begin. Avoidants aren't healed by grand gestures or declarations of love. They're healed by quiet consistency. When they see that you don't punish them for needing space, that you can tolerate emotional distance without resentment, it rewires their nervous system. It shows them that relationships can hold both closeness and individuality. You're teaching them, through your steadiness, that love doesn't have to be suffocating, and that is something they've never truly experienced before. Safety also means predictability. Chaos is poison to the avoidant nervous system because it mirrors the instability they grew up with. That's why they often seem drawn to routine, order, and solitude. They find comfort in structure because structure doesn't surprise them. So when they meet someone emotionally unpredictable, someone whose moods swing wildly, they pull back immediately. What they crave isn't endless excitement or passion, it's peace. The kind of peace that says, you're allowed to be yourself here. When they feel that, their walls begin to lower, and the person who once seemed distant starts to show warmth, humor, and depth you didn't know existed. But it's crucial to remember that offering safety doesn't mean losing your boundaries. You can be compassionate without being a caretaker. You can be patient without enabling avoidance. The goal isn't to fix them, it's to embody stability so they feel safe enough to fix themselves. Real love for an avoidant doesn't chase, it invites. It says, I'm here, but you're free. That paradox, commitment without control, is what allows them to move closer. When an avoidant finally feels safe, something extraordinary happens. They begin to trust love itself. They start to believe that connection isn't synonymous with pain, and that belief changes everything. It's not loud or dramatic, it's quiet, almost imperceptible. But it's real. You'll notice it in the way they stay when things get hard, the way they open up instead of shutting down, the way they choose you, not out of fear of being alone, but out of the deep understanding that for the first time, they are safe enough to love. When you're dealing with an avoidant person, it's easy to miss the importance of their small gestures. They're not the type to make grand romantic statements or to pour out their emotions openly. Their love speaks in subtleties, in quiet actions that often go unnoticed by those expecting overt affection. But for someone who's built their entire emotional survival around avoidance, these small steps are massive. When they initiate a conversation, when they text you first, when they stay present in conflict instead of withdrawing, these aren't small things. They're milestones. Each gesture represents a moment where fear didn't win, where connection triumphed, even if only for a moment. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves through distance. Every instinct they have tells them to retreat when emotions run deep. So when they choose to lean in, you must understand what it cost them. It's not casual, it's not easy, it's a decision that goes against their conditioning. For you, it might be as simple as them apologizing after an argument or sharing a vulnerable detail about their past. But for them, that's the emotional equivalent of walking across a tightrope without a safety net. It's terrifying and profound. A mistake most people make is expecting avoidance to love the way they do, to show affection with constant reassurance or physical closeness. But avoidants express love differently. Their actions are quieter, their words more measured, but their meaning runs deep. When they reach out first, it's their way of saying, "You matter to me," without having to use words that make them feel exposed. When they stay during a disagreement instead of disappearing, it means they're learning to tolerate discomfort rather than escape it. And when they make an effort to understand you, it means they're fighting the impulse to detach. These are not signs of weakness, they're signs of growth. You see, small gestures are monumental because they reveal the inner battle they're fighting. For them, every act of connection is a confrontation with their past. They are facing memories of rejection, moments where vulnerability led to pain, and fears that intimacy will consume them. So when they take a step toward you, no matter how small, it's a declaration of courage. It's them saying, "I'm willing to try again." And that willingness is everything. It means the walls are cracking, that there's trust growing beneath the surface. What matters most in these moments is how you respond. If you dismiss or overlook their efforts because they don't look like what you expected, you reinforce their belief that it's safer not to try. But if you notice and appreciate their efforts, even the smallest ones, you create a powerful feedback loop. You show them that connection doesn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. You show them that their small attempts are enough, and slowly, step by step, those gestures start to grow. It's also important to recognize that progress with an avoidant isn't linear. They might move closer one day and retreat the next. That doesn't mean they don't care. It means they're navigating their fear while trying to build something new. Healing isn't smooth, it's messy, and it requires patience. What looks like inconsistency from the outside is often a process of unlearning old defenses. When you can hold space for that process without taking their distance personally, you help them rewire their understanding of love. When avoidance starts showing up, however subtly, they're rewriting their emotional blueprint. Every small step forward is proof that they're learning to replace fear with trust. And that's something worth noticing, because for them, love isn't loud, it's quiet resilience. It's the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. It's the decision to open up 1 inch at a time. So, when they do something small, something that seems almost insignificant to you, see it for what it really is, a moment of victory over everything in their past that told them love was unsafe. Those moments are where transformation begins. Loving an avoidant person is one of the most delicate emotional challenges you can face, because it requires the rare balance of empathy and boundaries. You can't save them by losing yourself. You can't love them into healing if it means abandoning your own needs. And yet, the way forward isn't through detachment or resentment, it's through understanding. Loving an avoidant means you have to see their fear without absorbing it, to be compassionate without becoming a caretaker, to hold space for their growth while standing firmly in your own worth. That's a difficult balance, but it's the only way love with an avoidant person can survive without breaking both of you. Avoidants don't respond to guilt, emotional intensity, or pressure. Those things make them retreat further because they interpret them as threats to their independence. What they respond to is calm, clarity, and consistency. They need to know that you're stable, that you respect their autonomy, and that you won't try to control them emotionally. When you love an avoidant from this grounded place, you become a mirror that reflects safety instead of chaos. You stop feeding the cycle of pursuit and withdrawal that so often destroys these relationships. Empathy is crucial. But empathy without boundaries turns into self-sacrifice. If you constantly chase them, overextend yourself, or excuse behavior that hurts you, you're not helping them. You're reinforcing their avoidance. You're teaching them that distance and emotional withholding come without consequence. True empathy isn't about tolerating pain. It's about understanding where their fear comes from while still honoring what you deserve. You can say, I know you need space, and I respect that, while also saying, but I need connection and honesty to feel secure. Those two truths can coexist. Boundaries don't destroy love, they protect it from resentment. The danger of loving an avoidant is losing yourself in their silence. You begin to walk on eggshells, trying not to scare them away. You start measuring your words, your emotions, your needs, shrinking yourself to fit what feels safe for them. But when you do that, you end up living in their fear instead of your truth. Real love requires two people showing up as whole individuals, not one person dimming their light so the other can feel comfortable. If you disappear to keep them calm, you're not loving them. You're enabling their avoidance. The moment you stop doing that, you stop participating in their pattern and start inviting growth instead. Boundaries, when done right, don't push avoidance away. They earn their respect. Avoidance values strength and self-possession. They might resist at first, but deep down they feel safer around someone who knows where they stand. Because in their world, boundaries mean predictability. They show that you won't lose yourself, that your love is grounded and not driven by desperation. That's when they begin to feel safe enough to engage emotionally. It's not your empathy alone that earns their trust, it's your steadiness. Loving an avoidant also means learning to let go of control. You can't force them to heal or to love more openly. Their growth has to come from within. Your role isn't to fix them, it's to embody what healthy love looks like. When you do, you become the evidence that connection doesn't have to mean suffocation. You become the proof that love can coexist with freedom. The truth is, relationships with avoidance can be transformative, but only if both people are willing to evolve. The avoidant has to learn that love isn't a threat, and you have to learn that compassion without self-respect isn't love at all. When both sides grow, something powerful happens. They begin to trust, and you begin to stand stronger in your truth. Together, you build a connection not based on fear or dependency, but on mutual respect and safety. And that's the kind of love that lasts, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest, balanced, and real.